What do you make about why we lost our credibility? Let's start there.
Well, I think what we would like to think is that, well, the outside culture is secularizing and hostile to Christianity, and that's the reason for this. So they're looking at our virtues and they despise them. We would like to say that. That's not what I think is happening for the most part. I mean, there's some of that, but I think for the far more dangerous thing is that you have people who are looking at us and saying, "You don't really believe what you say you believe." Sometimes I think there is a fearfulness of the outside secularizing world that can tip over into an anxiety and a panic and an anger. And with that, desperate times call for desperate measures that actually ends up secularizing. Because you end up with people whose own kids are then looking and saying, well, if that's what Christianity is, then that's not what I am. And when you have the outside world looking at this and saying, oh, so this is really just some sort of political or cultural sort of a thing. And the very thing that people think they're combating, they're actually fueling.
What are your thoughts on hypocrisy?
I really don't think hypocrisy is the problem.
Tell me
And
more.
I kind of wish it were. Because if you think about the classic cliche, hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue, which is to say, well, this is the way that we ought to behave with character and integrity, so let's pretend like we are. That's not what's happening right now. I mean, it is to some degree, but it always has.
It's worse than that.
It's a lot worse than that, which is a sense of there's such a lowered expectation that there is, in many cases, a valorizing of cruelty and power for the sake of power. And, one of the things that was most surprising to me in dealing with some of really awful abuses of power is the way that many people would respond with, I mean, grow up. This is the way people are, and so you have to play that game. Well, that is a really, really diminished sense of what humanity ought to be generally, but even more so of what the church ought to be. This is kind of a depravity gospel that says, well, yeah, you're awful, but so is everybody else. And that means that awfulness is the way to win. And that is what has sort of set in at every level. And the problem with it, there's a sense in which no one wants to be naive, and nobody wants to be seen that way. And so you find yourself in a mode where you think you're being realistic, and what you're really becoming is Machiavellian and social Darwinist in ways that are really, really destructive of the church's witness, of institutional life, and maybe more importantly, of your own conscience and your own soul, because you start to adjust. And that's one of the things that happens is we're always able to talk ourselves into saying, okay, well, here's why I'm living with whatever it is. I mean, you can look at white pastors in the Jim Crow South in the United States, including a lot of them who knew better when it came to the kind of racial injustice that was happening around them. And what were they doing? Most of them were saying, well, in order to really help bad things from happening, I have to have a place at the table. And in order to have a place at the table, I have to conserve my influence. And so that means I can't speak to this right now, which ultimately, I mean, there's never comes a point in which someone says, oh, now is the risk-free time for integrity.